Welcome back, Life Sciences, from your break. As I said before, get the oxygen going, get the muscles going. Right, we are looking at the revision. Right, we're looking at the human transport, and we're just going over, recapping, right, the most important concepts that we need to look at. So far, we have looked at the heart, the whole structure of the heart. Then we looked at how the heart worked, the cardiac cycle, the pacemaker, and all of that. And then we looked at how the blood travels through the heart, right, in these arteries, veins, and capillaries. We also looked at with a deoxygenated blood versus oxygenated blood, that the heart has a double circulatory system, that it comes to the heart, goes to the lungs, comes back to the heart again, right? So we got to bring it in, get it to the lungs, get it all nice and fresh and back out. Now the next part we're looking at is a different part to the cardiovascular system. So all of those were connected to the heart, but there is another transport system called the lymphatic system that is also going to play a role in how we transport things around the body. Okay, again, there are words here, terminology. The lymphatic system itself is a new term that you need to be able to define. What does it do? And here we're also having a look at a few of the disorders. What could happen if we don't look after the heart, if things can go wrong. But we're going to start off with the lymphatic system. Okay, guys, when it comes to the lymphatic system, basically what you need to understand is the following. And the most important thing you need to realize is that, remember, arteries are really big and they are wide. And they are going to, imagine if I draw a line here, it's like being stuck on the highway. And the highway comes down to just one lane. And what happens there, you're going to form a lot of pressure around that area. And we kind of want that pressure in, because what happens is, as we get to these small little pressure areas, these are the areas where the cells are found. And what happens is, what we do is the blood plasma, the water part, seeps out of these, right, of the arteries, especially the capillaries. And what it does is, I'm just going to use a different color just to show it. What it does is it bathes, right? It bathes the tissues in what we call tissue fluid or interstitial fluid. And that is a really important concept, because what happens is, you're not biltong. We're not these dry biltong flakes. Our body needs to be moist. And this water over here, it's the blood plasma, right, now bathes, right, is going to bathe the cells. Now, what happens is the blood comes in, all right, it goes in the capillaries, and then it carries on again. But what happens is this fluid is constantly coming out. It's constantly under pressure. Now, what happens if we don't return this pressure back to our bodies? I'm going to show you the next slide. This is what's going to happen. Look at this poor lady over here. This is what a normal leg should look at. What's happening here is all the lymph fluid is going into the tissue fluid, and what is not happening? This drainage. It means that this system, her lymphatic system, is not working. So what do we have here is, when we push this water into the tissue fluid, we need to have a system that takes that excess fluid and drains the tissues. Because remember, the blood is constantly flowing. It doesn't stop. So what's going to happen is, this lymphatic system, this lymph, is going to transport this excess fluid, right? And it's going to return it to the blood, and the volume is going to keep the same. Now, also what happens is, what we also need the lymphatic system is, as you can see, it doesn't have the high, all right, water content of blood plasma. And this is one of the ways, if you did biochemistry, that we can transport fats. Guys, if we transport fats into our blood system, we are going to clot our arteries by the time that we are 2. So what do we have? We have a system here, all right, an alternative system that can transport fats. And your lymph system, right, it has valves. If we have a look, if I show you the next diagram, it's all these green things over here, right? So it's not like the blood where it's closed. It just starts and it drains, right? So what it's doing, it's draining the excess fluid. It's transporting fats. You can feel it. It's your glands. Sometimes when you're sick, those glands are swollen. Why? Because they also make white blood cells that help you, all right, with it. But ultimately what they do, they just take that fluid, travel different transport way in which you go, and then they're going to return to the heart there. So they play, right, quite an important role, as I said, in certain things that are happening in the body. It's the lymphatic system. Right, as I said, blind ending things, they're not closed, they don't form this whole closed system like they do. So what generally happens is, because they don't have the muscles that your veins and your arteries do, you actually are a bit of you guys make it work. So very often the lymphatic system, you'll find it's near a muscle. So if I do work, what does my muscle do? My muscle works, and when my muscle works, it gets the lymph fluid going up the body. So I kind of like our muscle system and our blood system try to help it to move, because it doesn't have that same muscle system as our heart, our cardiovascular, our blood vessels, especially our veins and our arteries have. All right, guys, now we also need to look at a few things that we need to look at is what happens when we don't look after our heart. Okay, what happens when we have certain kind of diseases? And it's not only about looking after our heart. Sometimes when it comes to certain things like high blood pressure and high cholesterol, sometimes we are genetically inclined. What does that mean? Doesn't matter how healthy a lifestyle we have, right? Sometimes our heart, we can have problems with our heart. Right, so one of the things we have to look for, right, make sure, is high blood pressure. And that is when when we talk about high blood pressure, that's sometimes we have too much water, so I say, in our arteries, and it forces this pressure, and that pressure, right, adds pressure onto the heart. And what can the heart do? Right, the heart, if it has the high pressure, the heart can stop. We can have a heart attack, or the heart itself can stop, right? Or what could happen, we have a stroke. What is a stroke? Right, is where we either bleed in the brain or we have a clot, either one of those two. And what's happening, the brain tissue is not going to get blood, and that could happen. Vision loss. Guys, very often the pressure in our eyes, all right, presses against our eyes, and we can actually see blind. So that's why I've got this lady over here. She has got a machine, right, that is going to measure her blood pressure. And as I said, this is the blood pressure that we're looking at. This is our systole, right, over our diastole. How hard does our hard work, systole, and what happens when we are at rest? This is a really long word. It's called atherosclerosis. And what happens here, can you see these are my arteries? And you see what I'm doing when I eat foods that are very high in fat? I start to block. What does the fat do? It blocks the arteries, all right? That leads to high blood pressure. But where is it going to block? It usually blocks the arteries in the heart, right? And what happens is it blocks, it stops the blood, or it causes it to burst, and then we have a heart attack, right? And that's where we need to have all the bypasses and the stents, etc. Okay, this is quite a tricky question that I've given to you, but it's related to blood pressure. As I said to you, it's quite a tricky one, so let's see if we can work, even if we just work through the first question, let's see what it says here. It says the diagram below shows aortic pressure during the cardiac cycle. A normal blood pressure is said to be 120/80. So have a look, see around about here. All right, that would be a normal blood pressure. So what it is basically, as we said, it's your systolic, when your heart contracts, and then what is your heart at rest. The systolic pressure is the highest pressure that the blood in the aorta reaches. So that's going to be over here. While the diastolic pressure is the lowest pressure that the blood in the aorta reaches. So we're going to look at that one. That's going to be a normal one, but have a look here. We're going to have a high one. So while the diastolic pressure is the lowest in the blood that it drops to. Okay, so the question is, using the information in the diagram, you now have to work out this person's blood pressure. Right, so we have a look over here. This is the normal one. That's what it was. But look what happens to this guy. So he now might do something or whatever. And what does his blood pressure do? I'll say he. It could be a she. I'm being a little bit sexist here. So I'm going to take my ruler. I don't have a ruler, but I'm going to judge. And this is the highest one. And looks like I get to 160. All right. So it looks like I get to 160. So now what happens to his heart? It goes down, all right? And then it goes up again, but that's going to go another stretch. So here we go. We're going to go up there. I'm going to go. You can choose either here or here, but they're pretty much the same reason because that's where it's low. Oh, my soul. And we're going to get to 120. So this guy's blood is 160 over 120. Now, if I was to ask you the next question, do you think it is normal, low, or high if the normal is 120 over 80? And this guy, all right, is 160 over 120. He definitely has high blood pressure. Okay, and I'm afraid it looks like that's all we have time for. Our time is running out. Guys, go over the revision notes, go over past papers, all right? Go and see if you can practice these kind of questions. There's lots available to you. And that is all we have time for. See you next time. Cheerio, bye.